Picture this: St. Petersburg, Russia, 1825. A freezing December day. 3,000 Imperial army officers, men who had chased Napoleon all the way back to Paris, now stand defiant in Senate Square. They are the cream of the Russian nobility, yet they're risking everything: their lives, their titles, their fortunes to demand a constitution and an end to serfdom. But their hopes for a new Russia are about to be shattered on Sunday. This is the story of the Decembrist Uprising, a noble rebellion crushed in ice and blood, but whose revolutionary spirit would echo for a century. Welcome back to All Nations History Hub, where we bring the past's most dramatic moments back to life. The story really begins not in Russia, but in the streets of Paris. Russian officers, having defeated Napoleon's Grand Army, marched into the French capital as liberators. They were young, educated, and had just saved their homeland. But in France, they saw something that shocked them: a society built on ideas of liberty, equality, and citizen rights. They read forbidden books, mingled with European intellectuals, and witnessed a world where people weren't owned by their landlords. They returned to Russia as heroes, but they were changed men. Back home, they were confronted by the brutal reality of their own country: an absolute monarchy under Tsar Alexander I, and a system where millions of people were serfs, essentially slaves. This was a stark, unbearable contrast. How could they have fought for European liberation only to return to a nation in chains? This profound disillusionment sparked a fire. Secret societies began to form among these progressive officers. The Union of Salvation, and later the Northern and Southern Societies, became hotbeds of revolutionary thought. They weren't just angry young men. They were poets, thinkers, and battle-hardened veterans. Figures like Pavel Pestel and Nikita Muravyov drafted radical new constitutions. Pestel's plan called for a republic, the abolition of the monarchy, and the redistribution of land. Muravyov's was more moderate, proposing a constitutional monarchy similar to Britain's. For years, they debated, planned, and waited for the right moment to strike. They believed that when the time came, the army would follow them, and the Tsar would have no choice but to yield. Their chance finally arrived in the chaos of an unexpected succession crisis. In December 1825, Tsar Alexander I died suddenly, leaving no direct heir. His brother Constantine was next in line, but he had secretly renounced the throne years earlier to marry a Polish commoner. This was not public knowledge. The throne was meant to pass to the youngest brother, Nicholas, a man known for his rigid, militaristic, and deeply conservative views, the exact opposite of what the Decembrists wanted. For a few confusing weeks, the empire was in limbo. The army initially swore allegiance to Constantine, who was in Warsaw and had no intention of ruling. When the truth came out and a second oath was demanded for Nicholas I, the secret societies saw their opening. It was now or never. On December 26th, the day Nicholas was to be proclaimed Tsar, the Decembrist leaders put their plan into action. They told their soldiers that Nicholas was a usurper and that the rightful Tsar, Constantine, had been arrested. They marched their regiments into Senate Square, right in front of the seat of government, forming a massive hollow square. Their goal was to prevent the Senate from swearing allegiance to Nicholas and to force the establishment of a provisional government that would adopt their new constitution. But from the start, things went wrong. Their chosen leader, Prince Sergei Trubetskoy, got cold feet and never showed up. The other regiments they expected to join them wavered. For hours, the rebel troops stood in the freezing cold, surrounded by a growing crowd of civilian sympathizers, but they were isolated. Inside the Winter Palace, the new Tsar, Nicholas I, was anything but indecisive. He was furious. He saw the uprising not as a political protest, but as a personal betrayal and a mutiny that had to be crushed without mercy. He first sent envoys to reason with the rebels. Mikhail Miloradovich, a beloved war hero and the governor of St. Petersburg, rode out to speak to them. He was a veteran of the Napoleonic Wars and respected by the soldiers. As he tried to persuade them to stand down, one of the more radical Decembrists, Pyotr Kharkovsky, shot him dead. With that, any hope for a peaceful resolution was gone. The rebellion had shed its first blood, and it was the blood of a hero. As dusk began to fall on the frozen city, Nicholas's patience ran out. He had surrounded the square with 10,000 loyal troops and, most critically, artillery. He gave the order to fire. The first shot was a blank, intended to scare the rebels into submission. They held their ground. Then came the real volley. The cannons roared, firing grapeshot, a brutal anti-personnel weapon that sprayed a deadly fan of metal balls. The effect was devastating. The tight ranks of the rebel soldiers were torn apart. The square became a scene of absolute carnage. Men screamed and fell, their bodies shattering on the ice. The survivors broke and ran, trying to escape across the frozen Neva River. But Nicholas was relentless. He ordered his artillery to fire at the ice, breaking it apart and sending hundreds of fleeing men, and even civilian onlookers, into the freezing water to drown. The noble rebellion was over in a matter of hours, drowned in blood and icy water. The aftermath was swift and brutal. Nicholas I rounded up hundreds of suspected conspirators. A state investigation was launched, and the Tsar himself acted as the chief interrogator, determined to root out every last trace of the revolutionary cancer. The trials were a sham. 5 of the main leaders, including Pestel and the poet Kondratij Ryaev, were sentenced to the humiliating punishment of hanging, a fate usually reserved for common criminals, not noblemen. Over 100 others were stripped of their ranks and titles and condemned to a life of hard labor in the desolate wastes of Siberia. This was a fate many considered worse than death. They were sent in chains on a brutal 1,000-mile journey to the east, destined to never see their homes or families again. But this is where one of the most legendary chapters of the story begins. An incredible act of loyalty and love unfolded. 11 women, wives, fiancées, and sisters of the condemned Decembrists chose to defy the Tsar and society. They voluntarily gave up their titles, their wealth, and their children to follow their men into Siberian exile. Women like Princess Maria Volkonskaya and Princess Trubetskaya undertook the perilous journey to the remote prison camps. Their arrival was a miracle. They transformed the bleak penal colonies into centers of culture and education. They established schools, libraries, and clinics, not just for their husbands, but for the local population. They became legends, symbols of sacrifice and unwavering devotion. The story of the Decembrists, their bravery, their sacrifice, and their noble ideals was passed down in secret. They became heroic figures for future generations of Russian revolutionaries. Thinkers like Alexander Herzen and later Vladimir Lenin saw themselves as the heirs to the Decembrist legacy. The failed coup of 1825 was seen as the first modern Russian revolution, the opening shot in a long struggle against the tsarist regime that would culminate nearly a century later in the fires of 1917. The seeds planted in the snow of Senate Square would one day grow into a forest that would consume the entire Russian Empire. The Decembrist Uprising stands as a tragic and powerful testament to the courage of those who dare to fight for their ideals, even in the face of impossible odds. They failed, but their failure echoed through history, inspiring the very revolution they had tried to prevent. What do you think? Are failed coups just as important as successful ones for shaping history? Let us know in the comments below. If you found this journey into Russia's past fascinating, please hit that like button and subscribe to All Nations History Hub for more stories that shaped our world. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.